Welcome to the Shofar podcast with Hebrew Usher.
I am back, and I'm excited to be back. I've been gone for a while. I don't even know how long I've been gone. I'm not sure if I should count because I'll feel even more guilty for leaving my podcast in the middle. I was in the middle of explaining a concept while we were talking about narcissism, and something happened. I think I should talk about it. It's obviously something that did bother me, and I think from my absence you would realize that it's something that's important. If I recall, and this is when I put out an announcement that I wanted to start a podcast. It was Feb, I remember. And what happened then was I came up with a list of topics, and I said what I wanted to speak about. And narcissism was the first thing because I think it affects how we interact with one another in the faith. So what happened there while I got COVID, well, let's put it as simple as that. And then I struggled. After I recovered, I struggled just to get back into things. And in April, again, I said I was starting out, and then I was able to record. I think that was around April, maybe May, somewhere there. And then I went for maybe a couple of weeks, and I started exercising because I run quite often. So I'm a runner. And while I was running, I got a bug, and then I was out, and then that's why I've been away. But look, other developments did okay while I was away, which I think are good, because if you're listening to me now and you listen to the previous episode, what is it? Is it episode 2? I'm not sure whether episode 2, if it's episode 2 or 3, one of the two. The episode which has to do with narcissistic supply. If you do listen to that episode and listen to this, I think you're gonna feel that the tone of my voice and how I'm communicating is different. And there's a specific reason. In the period that I was away, I actually started 2 other podcasts. That's one of the reasons why I took so long to come back. But I think those engagements have been good for me. They've helped me develop in terms of speaking to myself. It's always weird. I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at a painting. There's a screen on my right and my notes on the desk, and a mic in front of me. And I've bought I must tell you, I bought a little gadget which allows me to actually do quite a few funky things. I can get a phone call up. I can do a podcast with a phone call. It can add music to the podcast. It does effects. Let me give you one example. I'm gonna I hope that's playing. So I'm giving myself an applause. I think that was recorded, and I hope so, because if it's not, then this is going to be a weird segment in the podcast. I think it was worth the investment, especially with the amount of time I am spending on podcasting, and I intend on spending doing podcasts because it's just much better. And everything that I tried didn't work. It made podcasting very difficult. So I hope this is going to make it easy. It's going to help me bring out more episodes. Something else that I did while I was away is I listened to more podcasts. I listened to how people were breathing. It's the weirdest of things that you pay attention to, how people are breathing. You can hear someone swallowing their saliva. And I realized that, look, podcasts need to be natural. It needs to be an easy environment. And that's what this is going to be. So we're going to head back into our topic. It's going to be an easy environment. I'm going to talk with my natural voice as much as possible. This little gadget I'm talking about has effects. I may even decide to give myself a little bit of a boost in my voice and a few other things. But nonetheless, I think it's the content which is more important than the voices and all of that. I want to jump right back in. I haven't really looked at my notes to say where I was, but I think I remember, because this is it's a conversation and a topic which I'm confident about. We were talking about narcissism, a deep and excessive need for attention, desire, and admiration. We spoke about that. When I spoke about narcissistic supply, really what I wanted to do there is just to understand why narcissists do what they do. They need the supply. They need that fix, right? And remember, I did say that sometimes, I can take examples to the extreme, but even some traits can be toxic And there are something that we need to look at. And obviously, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a practicing psychologist, and I cannot help people with that. But from a spiritual perspective, I think I can give light and to others who have traits, whether due to past traumas and past experiences and whatever the case may have been, or the current living conditions. If they see any of these traits manifesting in them, I want to help those brothers and sisters to realize that they need to work on it, and also to realize why they need to work on it. Because if the word is our guide, which I do believe it is, if we're believers and we're in the faith, if the word is our guide and it's our moral compass, if we look at it from that perspective and realize that it is not acceptable, hopefully we'll do something about it. And that's why we're having this topic, and that's why we're speaking about it, and that's why I don't have to go back to my notes. So I'm just going to continue. Narcissistic supply, it's the fix that a narcissist needs. And if you also have some of those things and some of those traits, maybe it's something that you need to look at. But we'll be going to now, having talked about the narcissistic supply, having defined what narcissism is, we're going to talk about narcissism in relationships, because honestly, that's where the greatest impact is going to be, in relationships. Now, I'm going to go specific to romantic relationships now. If I'm talking about romantic relationships, I'm talking about a husband and a wife. And let's face it, it is possible to marry a narcissist. It is possible to marry someone with narcissistic tendencies or narcissistic traits. And sometimes you might not observe them. And maybe you married them and you didn't realize that they had those traits. Or maybe you saw those traits and you thought that it was something you're going to talk about, and it's something that's going to go away so easily, and you realize that maybe it's not. Or maybe you are someone who has those traits and you haven't been able to identify them and say, what is this? Listen up and let's talk about it. But we need to talk about narcissism in relationships. This is something that's particularly important to me, because as a nation, a Hebrew nation, I think we've been hurt. We've gone through quite a lot of let's say traumatic history. We need to come together to heal one another, and we need to recognize where we need to heal. The last thing we need is a toxic party in a relationship who's going to take us backwards while we're trying to heal and while we're trying to grow to be better. So without, as they say, further ado, let's talk about a few things. Again, the definition, as you heard, about narcissism, or the narcissistic personality disorder. I'm trying my best, and by the way, to all of you who are listening, to enunciate, not to speak like narcissistic personality disorder, and to say narcissistic personality disorder. And if I don't get it right all the time, please bear with me. I'm going to get there. Everything we're going to speak about hinges really on that definition, which is, it's about them. It's about the narcissist. That's why they're in the relationship. A narcissist in a relationship is not in the relationship for the other person. They use the relationship to get their fix. And that's why we spent some time talking about a narcissistic supply. It's important to understand that. If you're in a relationship hinges on a balance. And I do qualify this. A balance doesn't mean 50-50. A balance can be 60-40, it can be 65-35. Well, a balance just means that everything works. If your wife is at home and you're working and that works for you, that's fine. If your wife works half a day and you work maybe slightly less and it works, that's fine. If you're not working at all and your wife is working and you're doing something different and maybe you're advancing the gospel and that balance works, it works. It's a balance. It's not about 50-50. It's not about being equal. So I always explain that. But understand this. You're not going to be able to get a balance with a narcissist, because a narcissist will first want to take. However, they will only want to take. I hope you understand that. They will first want to take, and then after that, they will only want to take. It's not about creating a balance, but it's about sustaining them and what they want. And obviously, if someone is not a full-blown narcissist and they have tendencies, they may give, but they're not going to give anything that's going to compromise them. So in a relationship, don't expect a narcissist to be one to create the peace at their own expense, at the expense of their ego, the expense of their self-esteem, or whatever the case may be. They're not going to want to be the bigger person who takes the moral high ground, as we often say. So that's just something that you need to understand. Let me give you an example of something that happens in narcissistic relationships. And I think I probably spoke about this. Narcissists tend to want to change conversation to be about them. The first thing that you're going to realize there that you're going to lose is humility. Because if someone wants everything to be about them, forget that they're going to have humility. I don't see how that's going to work. I don't see how they're going to have humility when they turn everything to be about themselves. And it really is going to be about themselves. So you're going to be in a conversation with them, and you might want to share something that you did. And maybe you share a conversation, you share that you were speaking to someone, and you can explain how the conversation went. And believe me, they will find a way to turn it back to them, and either to create a spotlight around themselves. And sometimes they try to make it as though they're being modest. Not really. They're not really being modest. They want you to recognize their brilliance, their supremacy. But why I'm mentioning that is, realize when you're conversing with people, what is your behavior around conversations? Is it about you? If it is, there's a problem, especially if you want to build brotherhood and sisterhood. You see, brotherhood and sisterhood, now I know I'm talking about romantic relationships here, but I'm going to move to that. But brotherhood and sisterhood hinges on a key component of care and compassion one toward another, receiving one another. So you think about the next person. In your conversation, it's not just about you. Now, if it is only just about you, you're not going to be able to build the next person. Now, imagine your romantic partner, imagine your wife, imagine your husband you're in a relationship with. You need to build a lifelong relationship where you're going to bring in children, who you're going to have to teach morals and values, and the relationship is about you. Now, obviously, if you've got narcissistic tendencies, recognize that it means that scripturally you're not doing what is right. There's going to be a problem when you're going to have to take values, scriptural teachings, and pass them on to your sons and to your daughters, because you're going to be focused on yourself such that you're not going to be able to do such. Right? So that's just the first part of it. The second part of it is you want to build a happy marriage. How are you going to build a happy marriage when the marriage only focuses on one person? Yes, as I said, it doesn't have to balance in 50-50. But the balance that both you and your partner create needs to work for the both of you. Hence, we need to understand that relationships, the same as in the faith, we are espoused to the Most High as His bride. The church is espoused to the Most High as His bride. But we also must rejoice in the Most High. It doesn't mean we're equal with the Most High. No, far from it. We're not equal to Him. We recognize His supremacy. He's far above us. He's far superior to us. He's far more knowledgeable than us. He's far more powerful than us. Yet, we recognize Him as our head, as our leader, as our guide, our strength, and our buckler. The one who teaches us all things. And we say without Him we are nothing. Yet, we don't become subjects of misery, but we become subjects rejoicing in the balance that we have, Him over us and us being beneath Him. And that's key. When the Most High gives us that joy, and we say you should have joy in the Word. So you read the Word. You don't read the Word which tells you to submit to the Most High, and then you say, but why? Why is He being abusive? You don't see the Most High as abusive. So I want us to understand the same concept even in marriage, that it's important to make sure that we don't do something that is going to create unhappiness in our spouses. If what we do does create unhappiness in our spouses, it doesn't necessarily mean it's our fault, but we have to discuss it. If we do create unhappiness due to narcissistic tendencies, it's going to be very difficult to have such a discussion until we deal with the part of ourselves, which is the lack of humility to be able to submit and to listen to someone well. Obviously, the example I just used, it's assuming that us as a spouse, we must be happy. Let me put it the other way around. We can also grieve the Most High. How many times has our nation not obey the Most High. In the book of Deuteronomy chapter 32, the Most High says, talking about Jeshurun, says, Jeshurun has works and fat. You've been given everything. Now your leader, your head being loving, gave you everything that you needed. And what did you do? You thought about yourself. You waxed fat. You went about your own ways. You went about your whoring. You did according to your own pleasures. Now you change the relationship and it's about you. It's not about the other person. Now you were supposed to obey. They provide for you, but you don't do that. And now it says the Most High, we drove him to jealousy. We thought about ourselves, regardless of the fact that he is the one who called us into his nation to be his people. But we turned unto vanities, unto other gods. We moved him to jealousy. We provoked him. We did foolish things. We went after the warnings of other nations. And that's why he punished us. But he had provided. So what I'm trying to say here is, don't listen to this and say, well, narcissists can only be men, or narcissists can only be women. Narcissists can be either one of the two. Be that it is me. This is not only just about critiquing, but it's about highlighting certain issues which are key, which are important, and which we need to then have a look at and understand. Because some of them, as I said, they're tendencies. They build up small and they start small, but we need to deal with them. And specifically, this one is about humility. We need to submit one to another. Not that we submit in terms of authority, that you are underneath the one, but we need to submit one to another in the portion of not harming the other person, of doing good to the other person, of loving the other person. I know for a fact that husbands love their wives. In a normal relationship, let me say, normal is not the right word that I'm looking for, but let me say is in a conventional relationship, what is expected. In a typical relationship, I should say, that husbands will love their wives, they will provide, and they will care for their wives. And their wives also will do the same. So there is that mutual love, one for the other. However, it's possible that that love doesn't exist. And when you've got narcissistic tendencies in one party, that love will definitely not exist. So that's just the one part that refers to the manipulation of conversations. So the one party will manipulate conversations, they will monopolize conversations, and they will turn it to be about them. So they will not be able also to recognize when the other person needs help. And that's, I think, a key thing for me when we're talking about righteous marriages. You see, there's two examples that are primary ways that I'm thinking about now. There could be someone who's pleading for help. Like, you can see they're pleading for help. They're going through something. They're struggling through something, and they need your help. So they need you to say, oh, they need you to comfort them and guide them and tell them and assure them that it's going to be okay. Give them the scriptures that will give them that assurance to say, look, we are supposed to go through this. We will go through the trials. As we say, my son, if that will come to serve the Most High, prepare your soul for temptation and understand that these temptations will be there. But now, even in those temptations, be comforted in the Most High. Don't lose hope. Don't lose faith. Don't fall back. Don't draw back. But there's also another form, which is the second one, which is not so obvious. When someone needs help, but they don't realize they need help, they can say something to you. Your partner can say something to you. They can be heavily misguided in their thinking, but it's the nuances that come out in their conversation. Let me make a practical example. One says, the way things are, maybe I think it's time that the world ends. It could be a statement, that could be just a blanket statement that we leave, but it's not. That if you listen to it, it's trying to say this person is observing something, they're going through something, and whatever they're going through is leading them to the conclusion that maybe it's time for things to end. And it is the case that there are other people who don't need this to end right now. There's many souls who need to repent before the end comes. Now you need to help that person. You need to guide them through proper conversation to say, talk to me. Why do you feel that this should come to an end? And there could be specific things that they're going through. But believe me, you see, if you focus inwards and it's about you, you won't be able to observe the person who needs help. And right there, when the statement should be picked up to say, well, let's talk about it. Let's unpack what you're saying. Why should it end? And you can find that they've had an experience which is difficult. Maybe they had an experience with a brother, an experience with a sister, an experience at work, which is quite difficult for them to process. The emotions are quite difficult for them to process, and they need you to guide them through the word. Now, this is the partner that is going to help you build your home. This is the partner you're going to build your home with, you're going to raise your children with. What happens if your partner you're going to build with is hurt? That hurt is going to transfer to the children. And it's very important that we understand that we need to guide and we need to tend to nature. And obviously, I do recognize that when I speak of these things, I do speak from mainly a masculine perspective, because that's the perspective that most of my thoughts are processed in. But as I said, it's not to say that it's only in the masculine nature. And I think in later episodes, hopefully, when I record again, then I'm going to speak about both men in narcissistic men in relationships and narcissistic women in relationships. So I do hope to speak about those two things as well. As I record now, it's past midnight, and depending on how much energy I have, I may actually decide to record the next episode right after a short break when I'm done with this one. If not, it's still coming. But let me go to the next example, still talking about narcissism in relationships, all right, or a relationship with a narcissist. It's intolerance. Intolerance here refers to the intolerance or lack of tolerance for differing views, or for a different opinion or a different thought which is not your own. That happens a lot. I think it's quite difficult for me to actually speak about this one with examples at the moment. It's not difficult from a personal perspective. It's difficult because I can't. It's difficult because I can't bring the example the way I want to bring it. But I could give it in the following manner. If you're narcissistic, you've got an expectation to want to be superior. If a view is different to yours, it's almost as though someone is not qualifying what you want. Why it's also a bit difficult, because I'm trying to think of the counter argument. It's not the case that every time someone doesn't agree, they are narcissistic. But intolerance is about, I would guess, maybe I'm saying the emotion that would come with it, but it's about the response, the internal response to when someone differs. And I think one of the most obvious ones is anger. I'm a passionate person. When I speak, I'm very passionate, but I'm very loud. I've taught myself not to be, because I come across as intolerant, and I can also dominate the conversation. And I'm actually someone who's quite comfortable with contradiction, because I learn through contradiction. And sometimes I disagree with someone because I hold a very strong viewpoint, and they say something, and I said, well, hold on a minute. Well, I still disagree with you, except on that one point. But then, because of the nature of my learning through discussion and disagreement, I might even say, okay, let me pose my thinking again. And I might still not agree fully, but then I want to add what I just agreed with, which you may have mentioned, and then also still add the parts which I don't agree, which I don't agree with. And I'm not intolerant to opposing views. But one thing that I did have, and it's something that I worked very hard to learn, is waiting for the next person to finish talking. And I'm still working on it. I'm going to say that. It's not that I'm done working on it. And sometimes I recognize it. And I think one of the ways that I do it is I just make mental notes and I listen. So I just shut up. I say, shut up. But when I shut up, I make mental notes of what the other person is saying. So it helps me craft their argument. But what that also does is it helps me understand them better. So the moment I have to engage, then I articulate what I understand from them, then I talk about it. However, obviously, this is not what we're talking about here. We're still talking about intolerance. But what I did just mention there, if this was a professional podcast, would have just thrown in an ad. So I am going to throw in an ad. Just hold on. I've got it on my new device. As I said, I've got funky stuff. So I'm going to do something and we're going to put in an ad, almost like an ad type of thing. All right. So you are listening to an episode of Hebrew Asha. While you're listening to an episode of Hebrew Asha, consider subscribing and following our channel, which is called A Rising Tide. And you can also visit our website, arisingtide.co.za. A Rising Tide is a family project with Hebrew Asha and Chaba Hebrew West, where we try to help people coexist together, find ways to live with one another, and teach life lessons and skills that will help them build better relationships, and above that, just to uplift them. A rising tide, a tide that uplifts as it rises. But in any case, I'm trying different things because it is my podcast after all. I want to enjoy it, and I also want you to enjoy it. I don't want you to feel like you're listening to a robot engaging with you. We are launching soon. Chaba, my wife, and I have started recording. I think we're on maybe the third or fourth episode of A Rising Tide, and what we intend to do is release A Rising Tide on a weekly basis, but it will be pre-recorded. One of the things that did happen is during this period, I became a father, and she became a mother, of course. But we became parents. So that has been consuming quite a lot of time, and it's affected my schedule in terms of recording the other podcasts, editing the other podcasts, and uploading them in the midst of everything else that I do. But please do support us in A Rising Tide. We look forward to getting your opinions there. And I think some of the topics that I speak about here will be shared across and will be taken across to A Rising Tide. But A Rising Tide is about coexistence and learning to live with one another, whether be it brother or sister, whether it be husband and wife, and sister and sister. And brother. It's whatever it is. It's about coexistence in the faith and what are the skills that we need and what are the nuances that we need to observe. So I think intolerance falls under one of them, and maybe that's why I went off a little bit talking about intolerance and the ways I have also managed to become tolerant to different views, but also trying to help other people tolerate my personality. Because I do have a strong personality which can dominate conversations. So I try to also ensure that I give the opportunity to others to be able to voice what they want to speak about. So in a narcissistic relationship, what will happen is that intolerance will build up, or it will be manifested rather. There will be less and less tolerance one towards another. Someone doesn't, as I said, if someone brings forth an idea and it almost goes against someone else's idea, what happens with intolerance is they shut it down. They don't want it. They don't accept it. And that's what we need to talk about. There's various reasons, but narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder or narcissistic traits is one of the reasons. Because if you feel triggered, you feel as though you're being undermined, you feel as though this person is not recognizing your superiority, then you will not tolerate them. Now, can you imagine when you're with a partner? They've got different life experiences from you. Yes, we believe in the same thing, but they've got different taste. They like different colors. They like different styles of clothing, different brands of clothing. What happens when they don't necessarily like what you like and you don't take that well? Or they have an opinion about how you should dress or how you can improve what you're wearing. I mean, I can just imagine how unhappy I would be in a marriage if I asked for an opinion from my wife to say, well, I'm thinking of wearing this garment. And she says, I don't think that those colors will work on you if you wear those shoes. And then I'm unhappy, as though her criticism is a rejection of me. You see, when I need that fix, it might happen. And sometimes what can happen is you want to surprise. And you want to surprise someone, and someone just doesn't think that your surprise was a great surprise. And they may not be good at pretending. I'm not good at pretending. And they may not be good at pretending. And they may say to you that, well, I say that you tried to surprise me, but that's not how we should do things. Look, we just wasted money and we spent this and this and this. Next time we need to discuss. Don't take that as a criticism of you as a person. It's a criticism of actions which led to a waste of money. We need to recognize that. The fact that money was wasted is not a rejection of you. It's something that we need to discuss, because money is a resource that we need in the family, and we need to use those resources widely. But if I'm going to correct you and you're going to have a problem with that, then we're going to fail to build, because instead of finding a way to continue to say, well, okay, what type of surprises do you like? If you like surprises at all, instead it's a case of, well, I just try to do something nice for you. You don't have to be mean. You don't have to be. And sometimes the person is not even mean. You think they mean because that's what you assume, because you assume you're being rejected. And the rejection portion of it continues over and over and over. And sometimes someone who's intolerant to differing views, they may end up not even sharing their views and voicing their views, because they may think it's better to just shut up than to say something. The next example is related to the previous one, of course, but it's the inability to engage in a conversation in a civil manner, which will become constructive. So I just made an example about money, and which is obviously you want the topic like that to be constructive. I would assume you want to then talk about budgets. Let's talk about how we use money in a household. Or if we misunderstood one another, maybe I said something and you were overzealous, and you didn't wait for me to finish what I said, and you were so excited to start because you're gonna do this thing and I'm gonna be happy about it, and then you were overzealous and then you did it. Maybe I said go plant something in the garden, and I was not done, and then maybe I said plant some seedlings, and you planted all the seedlings. And it was not all of them that were supposed to be planted. Maybe we were supposed to only plant 2 because we wanted to test whether it's the right time to plant and whether they were going to grow. And you planted all 24. And I realized that you planted 24 and they're all dead. And then I said, well, but no, that's not what we agreed on. And then you take it as a criticism of yourself and a rejection of who you are, instead of a criticism of your actions. And then we debate, and then we can't have a conversation to say, look, the same thing happened the last time when I asked you to do something. And, I think we need to talk about the fact that you don't wait for me to finish talking. Now, if it's a fact that you don't wait for me to finish talking, we should be able to engage in that. But there's no admiration in that. There's no praise. You don't want that. Why would you? A narcissistic trait doesn't want that. You don't want to be criticized. You don't want something to be highlighted which is contrary to what you believe to be correct. And you believe you did the right thing. And even when you realize you didn't do the right thing, you don't want to be corrected because of the part that is puffed up. Being puffed up is, it's not obvious. Let me say that. It can be obvious. It's not always obvious. I think it's much more correct if I put it like that. Being puffed up is not always obvious. But as much as scripture says, talking about the knowledge, that knowledge puffeth up, understand that you can be puffed up by your own narcissistic tendencies. This is the book of 1 Corinthians 8, verse number 1. Now, as touching things offered unto idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffeth up, but charity edifieth. Now, why? There's a need for us to have humility now. Don't be puffed up by knowledge that you're not going to listen. Don't be puffed up by knowledge that you're not going to listen to sound advice, maybe. You're not going to listen and subject yourself to other prophets who are going to speak the word. You're not going to subject yourself to other righteous men who are going to prophesy the word of the Most High. We know that knowledge puffeth up. But, if it is charity, there's going to be a willingness to edify, to help someone grow. And I've had this question. Maybe I'm going to use just 2 minutes. I've had this question so often, talking to a lot of people. And it will be different things. How do I overcome envy? How do I overcome this? How do I overcome jealousy? How do I overcome, someone is talking and I just want to talk over them and so forth. And over many things, I've got one answer that I say. And, well, it's not one answer, but it's a similar answer. It's an answer in almost in the same line, which is to say, You can't overcome evil by thinking evil away. You need to do good to be able to overcome evil. And when it comes to being puffed up, he says, charity edifieth. If you have love, it's going to bring down all of those emotions of being puffed up. It's going to bring you low. You're going to seek. You see, charity is a good. It's going to be a good that is going to seek to edify the next person. Regardless of who's wrong, regardless of who's right, it's not about winning the argument. It's not about winning the fight. It's about making sure that two people walk out of their standing. It's about making sure we don't leave any man behind. If we are in a disagreement, dissension, whatever the case may be, we don't see eye to eye, something bad really happened amongst us. We want to leave that situation with our marriage intact. That's important. I'm very cautious of the fact that there are nuances, obviously, and there are other things that can come up. Hence, I say this is not a be-all and end-all, but I'm just trying to trigger some thought around specific areas and specific things that we can start to think about. But once this happens, we're going to be puffed up and you're going to have an arrogant manner in dealing with something. It's about self-importance. There's no empathy. So it's going to go back to the first point which I spoke about, which is monopolizing conversation. But now you don't monopolize a conversation necessarily here. You monopolize the situation, but because of lack of empathy and because of self-importance and because of arrogance, you are unable to recognize your partner. You are unable to recognize what your partner is going through. And because you cannot recognize it, you are unable to help your partner through what you need to help them through. I am going to leave it here. I think there's a lot more that I do want to say, but I'm also trying not to say too much which is not under the same context or the same umbrella. Before I close off, in the book of Romans, it's about being peaceable with all men. Live peaceably. There's a specific reason when I look at narcissism why I wanted to speak about it. It's because I think it takes away the part of being peaceable with one another. We're not able to have peaceable relationships. We're not able to build one another for good. Instead, we end up destroying, and we end up tearing apart the things we need to be building. As a nation, I did say we're broken, and I know we're broken. We all have our past experiences. We all went through many things. The curses have put us all in broken places, and the word is helping us heal. But we need to understand all the things we need to be healed from in order to be able to build, to be able to live peaceably with one another. We also need to heal certain tendencies, psychological, spiritual, physical, which are manifesting themselves in us today. So I am going to close off with that one scripture. It's in the book of Romans chapter 12 verse number 18. It says, if it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. I say, if we are in the faith, it is possible to live peaceably with one another. But we need to learn how to live peaceably with one another. When I say shalom, I want to know that I am building a peaceful relationship with you. So on that note, I leave you all with peace, and I hope that you're going to listen to the next episode. From Hebrew Asher, I'm signing out. After such a long time away, I'm glad to be back. Shalom, shalom. Well, we have come to the end of today's episode. Thank you for tuning in. Remember to keep the conversations going among your families and to continue building our Hebrew communities. Please do check me out on my social media platforms. On Instagram, it's Hebrew_Asher. On YouTube, Hebrew Asher. You can also visit my website, asher.co.za. This has been lovely, really. Before you go, remember to follow, subscribe, or click that favorite button. I'm still here. I'm still present. Let us engage. Hebrew Asher signing out. Shalom, shalom.